In episode 3 of the amazing digital circus, we got the wild possibility presented to us that Kinger is responsible for the death of his wife within the game, or rather, her abstraction. My name is Deepcut, welcome back to Cartoon Universe, and let's talk about the terrifying possibility that Kinger is responsible for his wife's abstraction. This third episode of the amazing digital circus was horror-themed, making it the perfect episode to get released in October, setting up a spooky month for a lot of its fans. While most of the adventures that Kane creates seem to be very child-friendly, with themes like Western style or Candy Kingdom, he said in this episode that he wanted to create something more serious and mature for Zooble, though ultimately it became an experience that haunts Kinger in particular. Kinger is an interesting character because his memory has corrupted from being in the circus for too long. In the previous episodes, he is mostly just babbling nonsense, but as he and Pomni descend into the horror level that Kane has built this time, he becomes increasingly coherent. Pomni notes this, asking why that is, and Kinger gives the explanation that when he is in the dark, it brings back the more vivid memories of his wife being abstracted. Kane says his memories are returning because he's in a dark place similar to the one he was in when his wife became abstracted, the darkness of their pillow fort in the lobby area. Kinger, interestingly, says he doesn't remember what happened right before she became abstracted, but that suddenly they were back in the fort. This indicates to me that they were probably in another one of Kane's levels before being teleported by Kane because of the abstraction. And while this horror level is said to be brand new, it's easy to imagine that a similar horror-themed adventure, one with a dark room, may be where the abstraction occurred. Kinger acts like this entire place is familiar to him, and he becomes clear-headed on how to proceed through the level. It's almost as if he's beaten this level before with how he always figures out the solution using his parts, and how confidently he handles the gun. This level, however, was not supposed to be built for Kinger, but rather for Zooble, raising the question of why it seems to be so much of a personal attack on Kinger. In an attempt to truly horrify the people who choose the more scary door that Pomni and Kinger end up going down, I believe this level is essentially able to read the character's history to figure out what scares them. For Pomni, it's as simple as hating jump scares, but what's horrifying to Kinger seems to be a bit more curated. The most obvious example of this in the game is the mysterious spirit trying to possess their bodies, who asks Kinger directly about his wife. Kinger's wife is known as Queenie, the darker chess piece that can be seen with her own room alongside the other characters, but of course her face is crossed out in the photo because she has been abstracted. Before ending up in the basement, Kinger seems to see the image of his wife in the mouth of the mysterious, horrifying monster that is chasing them, and because of that, he is almost lured into his death. Because Kinger and Pomni went into this room, it seems to have built much of the horror around what Kinger had experienced in losing his wife, with metaphorical recreations of the terror that he is going through in his head. The most important piece to this puzzle is the mysterious man, the Hunter, who is said to explore this house before the others. Take a listen to some of what he said in his story.
My paranoia had driven me to the point where I was no longer the protector my wife and theoretical children needed. I ended up shooting the love of my life, mistaking her for the creature. It's ironic, isn't it?
You'll notice some peculiar things in the story that are meant to parallel what Kinger went through with his wife, it would seem. Here, the Hunter has described how his paranoia has made him a threat to his wife and theoretical children. The word theoretical is interesting because Kinger himself is something of a father figure in the digital circus, being the oldest one in the crew. The other characters aren't really his children, but they are his theoretical children, you can say, with him and his wife being the mother and father of the early digital circus. This makes the word theoretical a very interesting choice when talking about the Hunter's children within this recording, something that seems to reflect more so Kinger's psyche than the reality of the story within the game, which Kinger himself notes has some plot holes. Even more interesting, the Hunter says that in the attempts to protect his wife, he ended up becoming the monster and accidentally shot his wife. After this, Kinger gets his hands on the gun and confidently uses it to fight the monsters, only for that to be what the Hunter actually wanted, as it allows the demonic angel face to drag Kinger and Pomni to hell. Just like the Hunter in his story, Kinger using the gun has led to his and Pomni's downfall, down into the place that is called Hell in this level, similar to his wife ending up in the cellar after abstracting. Kinger even notes that it is his fault that they ended up down in this hellish basement, that it was his fault that they went down this path, clearly speaking of something a lot deeper than just this particular level. All of this gives the impression that Kinger himself may have shot his wife, even if by accident, with a glitching bullet in an advanced enough level, perhaps leading to Queenie getting abstracted. Following this, Kinger would repress his memories, not being able to handle the idea that it was his fault that he lost his wife. As tragic as this sort of death would be, however, it may not actually have been a bullet that made his wife abstract, but it could still very well be his fault. Abstraction can happen with enough of an exploited glitch putting pressure on an avatar, as we see with the abstracted monsters back in episode 1 affecting characters like Ragatha. But we also know that you can be abstracted from stress or emotional trauma. Characters like Kaufmo, who don't take the time to properly rest, just end up stressing themselves out to the point where they corrupt and abstract. And that means while something may have glitched out on Queenie to make her abstract, Kinger may really be blaming himself because of the emotional damage that might have caused it. As his memories start to return, Kinger ends up giving Pomni a speech about the importance of letting people know they are loved. He specifically says that the worst thing that you can do is make someone feel like they are not wanted or loved, and I think this is exactly what happened with Kinger and Queenie. You see, when Kinger's memories come back, he also mentions 7 years of training in computer coding just to end up trapped in this video game, giving an even greater weight to him somehow being trapped there with his wife, and him saying that it's his fault that even Pomni has ended up on this path. The story of the Hunter indicates that after Kinger got trapped in this game, he became obsessed with revenge for the force that trapped him there, which I imagine has to be Cain, at least in the mind of Kinger. In the Haunted Mansion level, this is represented by the demonic head, which is revealed to be something of a fallen angel, a divine being with control over reality the way Cain has control over the game. It could be the hunt to kill Cain, or at least solving the mysteries that he represents, that led Kinger to become paranoid and distracted, not paying attention to his wife Queenie. As he descended into darkness, he probably did more than just not show his wife love, but he may have legitimately just said mean and hurtful things, truly acting as if she was a burden in this world, instead of a partner or even someone he was responsible for. When Kinger and his abstracted wife returned to their pillow fort, he claims that she was able to calm down a bit in her abstracted form in the darkness, and seemingly from being able to focus on Kinger and seeing him show one last act of affection. Maybe there was no bullet at all, and Kinger just said something mean that made his wife finally lose her form, when she thought that she didn't have the one thing in the digital circus that made it worth living, someone who loved her. Maybe it was both, and him using the gun on her, even if by accident, was just the final nail in the emotional coffin after he had already hurt her feelings. This episode explored layers to other characters such as Zubul, but it really emphasized how Kinger is the most inherently tragic character in the show. We don't know how anyone ended up in the game, but Kinger managed to come in with a wife, who even outside of the circus seemed to be inherently complementary to him. In the game, the characters are given a form that seems personalized to them, one modeled off of their personalities more than anything else, and thus when two people take on a similar form, it means they have something of a similar brain or personality. Kinger, of course, came in as a king chess piece, but his wife Queenie came in as a queen from the opposing side, indicating that they were both very similar and yet had some staggering differences. He explains, after all, that he never thought he would like bugs, but since his wife collected them, he got into it as well. With him being into computer science and her into bugs, I feel they were both just science and nerd types, and that was probably a large part of what they loved about each other. They were both science-minded intellectuals, but they presented in different ways with different interests, but because of that, they were still able to see what they loved about themselves in each other. But in the game, you begin to lose the sense of who you really are, and if you don't focus on love first, you ultimately create your own little game within the digital circus, where you can't rest until you win, either by escaping or by revenge against Cain, as the case may have been. For now, Kinger seems to just want to focus on trying to enjoy what their lives are with the people he happens to exist around, but his story also gives me hope that one day he and the others could heal some of these abstracted characters. Even in the abstracted form, Queenie seemed able to calm herself and stop being so jagged, as Kinger explained, becoming more smooth-edged, almost like her form could perhaps revert with the right attention. But for now, that is still just a theory. So, what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you haven't seen it yet, go over to our community tab to vote on what amazing digital circus videos we should make next. See you guys then.